investigator of several major and high-impact research projects in Australia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Singapore, and has also published international extensively in different areas of education technologies. Professor Lim's presentation today is titled Students Monitoring and Managing Their Own Learning Through Engagement in E-Portfolios. Professor Lim.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, very good morning to all. I would be focusing my whole presentation on the experiences of the use of portfolio in the Hong Kong context, right? So through that, I hope that it would emphasize the importance of us empowering the students to learn how to learn, right? Because quite often in this time and age, we talk about the type of the learning skills, the type of the learning competencies that we want in our students. But the thing is, we may not spend enough time thinking through how do we actually support them in consolidating those experiences. How do we really provide them a platform to really make sense of those experiences, right? So I'm just going to be sharing with you some of the experiences that we had and is having now within the Hong Kong context, and how the e-portfolio or the digital portfolios are being used within a university in Hong Kong, which is the Hong Kong Institute of Education. Right, so this would be a very brief outline of what I'll be going through, just trying to emphasize the challenges that we face, so trying to just set a context and trying to articulate what the rest of the speakers before me have articulated in terms of the 21st century competencies and the need to make sense of these competencies, and really looking at how e-portfolio provide those opportunities to make sense of those competencies, right? I would provide you with the example, and then after that, sharing with you very quickly how the institution actually go about implementing such an initiative. This particular initiative on the e-portfolio was introduced in 2012, right? So I would be sharing with you the journey that we have actually gone through to implement that. Okay, so just to provide a really quick context, within Asia itself, in the publication by the Asian Development Bank, I think there is this speculation by 2050, we would see that up to 3 billion Asians would be able to experience the standard of living of that in the Europe in terms of the middle income group, right? So we would be expecting an increase in the middle income group within Asia itself, right? And the thing is, when I talk about the whole notion of speculation, it is still not a reality. So in the best case scenario, of course, you would be able to see the pie chart on your left, it's whereby you would have where you would have the Asia, right, having 52% of the income in the world, as compared to the pie chart on your right, whereby Asia would just have 31% of the income share, right? So whether we can achieve the left one as compared to the right one, it really depends a lot on our next generation, right? Whether we are able to meet up with the social, political, economic challenge within the region itself. Of course, the whole notion of growth, right, is nothing new, and how different countries have actually tried to beat the middle income trap. So if we are looking at growth in the the early part of the 1970s, you will be able to see that like countries like South Korea like probably started out at about the same point as South Africa and Brazil. But I think it's over the years, right, you could see that the South Korean economy have actually like gone right up. And the thing is, there are countries that started out at the same stage that are still caught in the middle income trap, right, like not being able to like move towards the value addedness, right? And I think what we need to be quite aware of is we do not want like Asia to be caught in that middle income trap. And in order not to be like to be able to like move on, I think we need to be quite careful that as we are preparing our students for the marketplace, right, that we want them to be agents of change rather than passive observers of the world events, right? And we want them to be able to live together in an increasingly diverse and complex society, right? And we want them to be able to constantly reflect and interpret fast-changing information, right? So what we really want to be able to develop in our students, right, would be a set of competencies, right, whereby they would be prepared for the 21st century marketplace, right? So from like critical thinking, like right through to ethical decision making. What I'll be emphasizing on in this presentation would be the first one, like learning how to learn, right? So the whole notion of getting students to make sense of their own learning, right? Getting them to consolidate their learning experiences and eventually be able to reflect upon it and eventually be able to showcase those competencies in which they have achieved, right? So I would be like looking at this in the context of e-portfolio and of course like using the Hong Kong Institute of Education as an example of how e-portfolio is being implemented in the institution. Okay, if we are looking at digital portfolio, the whole notion of portfolio is not a new concept, right? I think if you are going back to the literature on portfolio, right, it goes at least about like 4 to 5 decades back of how portfolios are being used as part of the assessment process in both K to 12 and higher education system, right? I think when we are looking at portfolio, the emphasis is a lot on reflection of learning, right? And eventually through the reflection is being used for learning as well, right? It is a consolidation of the learning experiences. And of course, when we are looking at digital, there is a possibility of sharing those experiences that is being consolidated by the student with other students through social media, right? And of course, when we look at reflection, it's not just like looking back at the past experiences, but it's also looking forward, right? How to align those experiences towards the learning outcomes that they want to achieve, right? Based on the goals that they have set. And what is really important is not just about them reflecting upon past experiences, but also planning what they want to achieve. So to be able to identify the learning gaps, right, of those experiences and eventually planning ahead of how they are able to close those gaps, right? And of course, with the term E, right, which is like portfolio mediated by technologies, especially information and communication technologies, right? The possibility of being able to build a learning community, right? Based on the e-portfolios that the students have actually developed. Okay, just to share like with you, as I said, like how the e-portfolio initiative is being implemented within the university. If you know the Hong Kong Institute of Education, it is probably the largest provider of the teacher education within Hong Kong. So we are looking at about like 89% of primary school teachers from Hong Kong having graduated from the university, right? And about 30% of the secondary school teachers having graduated from there, right? So it is the largest provider of pre-service teacher and in-service teacher education in Hong Kong, right? And if we are going to be looking at the graduate attributes of the institution, this would be a set of 21st century competencies that all graduates have got to achieve at the end of 4 to 5 years education in the university, right? And basically all the programs and all the courses would be aligned to these learning outcomes. This would probably be a description of each of these learning outcomes. In 2012, I actually led a team to develop an item bank, right, to create a self-assessment test for the students to be able to assess their own so-called 21st century competencies. So when they first come into the university, they are supposed to complete a 30-item questionnaire, right, about each of these competencies, right, from problem solving right through to the global perspectiveness, right, and and based on the self-assessment that they have gone through, right, we would then generate data, right, at the individual level. So each student would get a report of their self-assessment, and based on the report of their self-assessment, they would have a sense of how their peers are actually performing as well with regards to each of the so-called 21st century competency, right? So at the program level, at the institute level, how do they fare as compared to the rest of their peers, right? So this would be a report that all students would receive once they have completed their self-assessment. Okay, this form part of the report as well, right? So we would have a report for the students at the individual level, a report at the program level, and a report at the institution level. This self-assessment is actually being administered every single year that they are at the institution. And the thing is, based on this self-report, they would then create their e-portfolio, right, in trying to articulate how they are actually developing those competencies over a period of 5 years within the institution itself. Right, so what we want is for students to reflect upon that set of competencies and then eventually to create an e-portfolio of their experiences within their undergraduate program, right? Maybe a 4 or 5 years program, right? So we want them to be able to consolidate all these experiences that is being aligned to the learning outcomes, right? We want to be able to empower them, right? To be able to monitor and manage their own learning. We want them to reflect upon those learning experiences. We want to create opportunities for them to engage with the rest of their students and also with their tutors. We want them, as I said, to collect those evidences and eventually to showcase those evidences. And we are beginning to get the students to actually develop portfolios that eventually could be shown to their future employers, right, about the different types of competencies they have developed within their 4 to 5 years undergraduate experiences. The way we implemented it, right, is very much in line with the new higher education curriculum in Hong Kong. So for those of you who are familiar with the Hong Kong context, you will know that in 2012, all universities in Hong Kong moved from a 3 years undergraduate program to a 4 years undergraduate program. So it's 1 extra year. The students are living like high school, so rather than be taking the GCE A levels, which they used to, being an ex-British colony, right, they have moved towards the DSE, which is a direct entry tertiary examination. So at the end of the 11 years of compulsory education, they will enter the university as compared to 12 years. So with that extra year within higher education, we try to introduce a broader base of the higher education within the university context. So if you go to any of the government-funded universities, you would see that there have been a lot of talk about the total learning experience, a holistic development of the student by providing them a broader base of education, from general education right through to overseas experiences, co-curricular activities, and internship and field experiences. So what we have done is we have actually introduced a broader base of the higher education within the university. But as you are introducing a broader base, what we really want our students to be able to do is we want to be able to help them make sense of these experiences, right? And we thought that the e-portfolio would be a good way for them to consolidate all these experiences, right? The system that we are using is this open source system called HAAW. We chose that because we are using an open source learning management system called Moodle, right? So the HAAW is quite easily integrated within the Moodle system, right? So we are using the HAAW for the students to be actually developing their e-portfolio, right? So what we want them to be able to do is to be able to develop like mini e-portfolios within each of their course and eventually consolidate all these experiences to an overall portfolio, which I will give you an example of. Right, so over a 4 to 5 years, okay, there is a 5 years program in my university because all teacher education program is 5 years, right? It used to be 4 years, right? Because that extra year is very much like a PGDE within the Malaysian context, the postgraduate diploma in education, to ensure that they have got the certification to go on to teach within Hong Kong schools, right? So over a 4 to 5 years period through these different experiences, right? We want them to be able to consolidate the e-portfolio. Okay, just to give you an example of a consolidated e-portfolio of a student. Right, so in this case, this is one of the 4th year student trying to do a consolidation of the different experiences that he have gone through as a student in the Hong Kong Institute of Education. So this is the profile page whereby based on the self-assessment, right, he would be doing an assessment or an analysis of his strengths and weaknesses in the different 21st century competencies. Okay, so you could see how based on the self-assessment questionnaire, he would be able to identify where his strengths and weaknesses are. Right, and then after that, he went on to talk about his personal goals, right? And then he went on to talk about the learning outcomes that he had been developing within his undergraduate program, right? So you'll be able to see here, based on the consolidated learning experience that he have, right? If you take a look at the tab way up there, right? The tabs would show the different experiences that he is reflecting upon in this e-portfolio. So the general education courses, the field trips, the winter camp, the exchange, and a few other more experiences, right? And he then talked through about the learning outcomes that he have achieved in some of these experiences. this would be like one example of his experience during his internship in Shanghai, right? So like he would reflect upon it. He would be showing the different like digital artifacts that he had produced during the internship, and of course a reflection, right, during each week of the internship, right? So this is just like one example of one experience within the e-portfolio. Of course, there are other experiences as well. In this case, he's attempting to do a consolidation of the general education courses, right, in which like he have got to undergo. So again, he brought together all the courses, shared his reflection of each of the courses, and then uploading some of the digital artifacts that have been produced in each of the courses, right? So the emphasis is a lot about the students trying to manage their own learning experiences within the university. So rather than the tutor trying to monitor their learning, we are trying to get them to be able to monitor their own learning process, right? To be able to make sense, right, of the complex learning process and activities that they have gone through in their undergraduate program, right? And the thing is, based on those experiences, right, they would then come up with an action plan of what they want to be able to achieve. So if you are going to be clicking upon this, you'll get more detail of the action plan, but this is a quick summary of his action plan, right? So this is the consolidated e-portfolio that we expect all our undergrads or all our undergraduates, right, to be able to complete before they graduate, right? So this is actually a graduation requirement, right, for all the undergraduates within the Hong Kong Institute of Education, right? So we are talking about maybe 3,000 students per year, right, like doing this as they graduate, right? This initiative started in 2012, so we are not expecting our first batch of graduate until next year, right? So by next year, we would have at least about like 3,000 e-portfolios, right, that is being done by the students to be able to showcase to future employers or to their peers, and to be able to create like dialogues among themselves about those learning experiences. What we have done for this particular initiative is there were a lot of like background work that we have got to do, right, in order to come up with the supporting conditions to ensure that our students and our tutors are able to implement this initiative within the program, right? So this is probably a framework that we have drawn upon, right, to have a very clear set of vision of what we want to achieve. And I think the vision that we had within our university was really very much about getting our students to monitor and manage their own learning, right? So that vision actually drove this particular initiative, right? Because we want to empower our students to manage their own learning, right? And through the different courses, we actually got the students to be developing like mini e-portfolios that eventually would be brought together as a consolidated e-portfolio, right, that showcase their learning experiences within the undergraduate program. And of course, in order to implement that, right, we have got to ensure that we provide professional learning for our tutors, right? We actually got to get the buy-in of the senior management as well. We have got to ensure that we have got the ICT infrastructure, the support system. The communication and partnership is really quite crucial, especially the partnerships within the different offices. within the universities, and of course the constant evaluation of this initiative, right? So this would probably be like some of the details of the conditions that we have actually provided in order to make sure that the e-portfolio initiative runs smoothly, right? So from professional learning right through to getting the staff and senior management buy-in to ongoing evaluation so that we could constantly revise and refine the initiative itself. All right. We have also provided a suite of self-assessed learning resources for both the tutors and the students, whereby they are able to go in there and develop their e-portfolio through the different templates that we have given them and through the different like guidebooks that we have actually like provided for them, right, in order to work through the e-portfolio themselves. Right, so I have basically shared with you just one example, right? In this case, the example of the Hong Kong Institute of Education, right, in trying to empower our students in managing and monitoring their own learning. And I reckon that this would probably be the core message of my talk, right, which is the importance of getting our students to learn how to learn, right, given the complexities that they are faced with on a day-to-day basis, right? How do we as educators provide them with the platform, right, with the anchors and the supporting conditions for them to constantly reflect and make sense of what they have learned, and based on that, how they then identify the learning gaps and then make up action plans of what they want to achieve in terms of the learning outcomes that they have or have not achieved within their own learning experiences. Right, so with that, thank you very much. If you want my slides, you can just contact me. I'll be more than happy to send you my slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lim, for the very informative presentation. Any questions from the participants for Professor Lim? Yes? Can you introduce your name and your organization, where you're from?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Prof, for your very informative presentation. Ma'an from IIUM, International Islamic University, Malaysia. How do you use this portfolio for interaction between students themselves? And is anybody like following up and giving feedback on these results from the e-portfolio? Thank you.
Okay, I should have probably done more screenshot. So we are using a e-portfolio system called Mahara. Okay, not that it is the best system, because the students are always comparing it to the other social media platforms that they are using, especially like Facebook, right? So just like Facebook, the students could build their own profile, right? They could upload their reflection, upload their digital artifacts, and eventually they can share that among their friends, right? So just like Facebook, they can set their own privacy, right? So the e-portfolio can be viewed by just their classmates, or it can be viewed by the general public, or they could generate a secret URL, right? So once they have shared their e-portfolio, the other students would be able to place comments or put up postings about the e-portfolio of the students. So in the consolidated e-portfolio, which is actually part of a course, right? We have got a course called the consolidation course done during their 4th year, right? Whereby students are supposed to create an e-portfolio, and eventually there's a requirement by other students to be placing comments on their portfolio, right, in order to either provide suggestions on trying to bridge some of the learning gaps that have been identified, or to provide comments on some of the learning experiences that other students have gone through, right? So in a way, the e-portfolio would probably work like most social networking, like websites, whereby students could exchange ideas, exchange comments, exchange suggestions as well. And of course, like for us as tutors, we'll be able to provide them with the feedback. What is really interesting is for this whole e-portfolio initiative, a group of 25 students would be attached to an academic staff within the institution, whereby this academic staff with 25 students are supposed to support the students through the consolidated e-portfolio, right? So that is one. And on top of that, each student would have an academic advisor as well. So the academic advisor would have access to their e-portfolio, whereby the academic advisor could provide the students with consultation based on what they have produced in terms of their career goals, in terms of the choices of courses that they might take within their undergraduate program, right? So there are quite a bit of communications that are going on, like among the students and also between the students and the tutors, that include the academic advisors and supervisors.
That is very fascinating. I think, it would be interesting. I was just going to ask you whether, what the students did, has it been able to increase the marketability of the students? I just realized that you haven't finished the project yet, but I would imagine that that would be quite interesting to find out. I just want to ask you, in your setting, you decided to straight away do it for everybody. I'm just wondering, for certain courses, it might be quite tight, in terms of professional courses. Sorry, my name is Zahurin Muhammad. I'm from the University of Malaya. So at my faculty of medicine, for example, the program is so tight we cannot even put a pin through to see that there's a space to do it, and so on and so forth. So is there any way you think that perhaps this system can be introduced slowly? I love the self-reflection part and so on, because people can be sitting in the same class and yet not get an experience and so on. But, is there a place for it to be slowly introduced, do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is a very practical question, because I think what we have got to be quite careful about is this might be quite unique in the Hong Kong context because of the change in higher education curriculum. So we introduced this initiative, which would receive a lot of resistance if there's no change in the curriculum. But it happened that in 2012, right, there was a change in the curriculum within Hong Kong, right? And we were not so ambitious in a way that we try to implement e-portfolio in every single course, right? So we did not make it like requirement in the majors and minors. In fact, we only introduce it in the new courses, as what you have seen just now. Okay, I would say like new courses as in like courses that used to be non-credit bearing, like the co-curricular courses, right, or the overseas exchange, but due to the new curriculum, they become credit bearing. So of course, we only like brought in the e-portfolio in the core courses of general education, of overseas exchange, of the internship, as well as the field experience and general education, right? Because like these are new courses with new coordinators, we did not actually meet up with that much resistance, right, during our first year of implementation. But after 2 years of implementation, like last year, 2014, we began to have more and more course tutors from the majors and minors that came to us because they could see the benefits of those courses in which their students have gone through and say, hey, you know, it's like we would like to introduce like e-portfolio assessment in our courses. Can you work with us? So I got my team to start working through with them of how to implement some of the assessment in the form of e-portfolio within their courses. So you are totally right, it got to be done quite slowly, and we were quite fortunate in a way because, as I said, there was a new curriculum. So with a new curriculum, there are new teams. It's always much easier to persuade the new people than the not the older ones, but those who have been there for some time, right? So we were quite blessed in that sense, yeah.
Hi, Professor. May I know what are the challenges of setting up the e-folios, such as yours? The challenges.
Okay, I think the key challenge is actually the students. You think that with the students would be really excited about it. But the thing is, because we are using an academic platform, we are not using Facebook to create their own e-portfolio. The students would, of course, love to use Facebook to create their e-portfolio because they have created Facebook anyway for themselves, right? But the thing is, we were quite careful because we do not want bare-chested men on photos which are meant for their professional showcasing, right? So we want to keep the personal side from the professional side. Okay, that is one, right? So we did not opt for a more popular so-called e-portfolio system whereby they can actually showcase themselves. So we had a very big issue with the students because they kept on complaining that the system is not as user-friendly with those systems that they know. So trying to create the incentive for them to use a system beyond just an assessment tool is quite a challenge. So trying to be able to show them that, hey, you know, it's like what you are creating have a value, right? In eventually getting you a job, or have value in getting you to reflect upon your experiences. So as what the lady from the University of Malaya has said, it has been especially useful for our pre-service teachers, right? Because they have documented their so-called field experience in school. They have actually documented and consolidated all their lesson plans and resources, and even like video clip of themselves teaching. So they are actually using the e-portfolio as a CV, right, as they apply for jobs in schools, right? So I think we are beginning to have students who could see the value of it, and I think that buy-in is really important. Not so much of our tutors, but more of our students, that they have got to see the value in doing that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.